Welcome. Some of you are watching this, well, I think a lot of you are going to watch this on replay, and then I'm going to sit here and wait and see if someone is going to come and join me live. I'm going to try and find a way to. So this is the second call of my free self-love course that I'm holding live on Facebook, and then uploading to YouTube afterwards. And I'm gonna cover different things in all of the calls because there's also one tomorrow. And it looks like I need to have a fourth one too to answer all the questions. So let's see where things leads us. So if you are watching, I would love to hear, get a hi, how you're feeling, or yeah, just as long as it's something that's connected to what I'm talking about, which is self-love. I welcome reflections and questions also while I'm talking. Let's see where I can find this. Okay, and I'm gonna remind myself, because I didn't know, and also for the ones watching, that there is about a 30 seconds delay, so meaning that it might be a little bit of delay until I get that message. So okay, hi Lynn, hi Das, so great that people are joining. So I'm gonna say again that hello from the UK, someone is saying. Okay, thank you, Christopher, that's so lovely to hear. So yeah, for the ones who's joining, some of you maybe were here yesterday, some have, I know, watched the replay, and then for some, they haven't watched the first call, and that is fine. You're still gonna get just as much value from this call, and I also suggest to look at the first call, as they will have different subjects, all of them, and all of the subjects are about self-love. Okay, I see we have some people watching now, so I think I'm just gonna jump a little bit in, and I deeply appreciate everyone is here live. I have to admit that when I'm doing videos and I'm just basically talking to myself, it doesn't feel the same. So it's nice to have someone to kind of feel like I have an audience or someone to interact with. And I made it, someone's writing, I woke up a minute before thankfully. Yeah, it was meant to be. And hopefully it was a bit easier to find. I know that a lot of people struggled to find the video yesterday. Okay, so today I am gonna cover a subject that I am actually quite not sure how I'm gonna, what's gonna come out of it, because it's a subject that, so I'm gonna feel into from my heart what is coming out, because it's a subject that I'm journeying with every day, and that is about balance, and that part of loving where you're at now, and also at the same time feeling connected to the change that is coming, because we also know that in order to create change and make something happen, we also have to see it and believe in it. And this is, I think, one of the most interesting really challenges that is. And okay, where do I feel like starting? As usual, I just have, well, this time I have one page or just a few scribbles to keep myself a little bit on track. And I think was most important for me to embrace is that the only thing that is constant in the world is change. as in nothing is ever constant, everything is always changing. And that is maybe the most terrifying thing for our ego mind. It feels very vulnerable. And really, mainly, every kind of concept that is around us that we are taking us away from our true self. Remember, this course is about self-love. Is really grasping and trying to hold on to some kind of structure and trying to understand, trying to make sense of what really is chaos and always change, like that is always changing. And that has happening with my phone, so you know, sometimes I have to just push resume because it ends the live. And I haven't been able to set up my do the recording with my computer, so I was trying to make it safe by choosing my phone. So coming back to how change and embracing that has really been the most important aspect, really, when it comes to any kind of journey. And then I am not talking about only self-love, I'm talking about the whole thing, as in that we are always gonna experience changes. And then starting to a little bit disconnect from our minds leading the show. That was hugely important for me, and as I talked about yesterday, how I was expanding into mindfulness and understanding my mind and etc. has been really important, because that's also part of, you know, what we see in the world is that all this focus on the ego mind, on the rational mind. And the thing is that none of us are the same now as we were, you know, even just 10 seconds ago. With every input around us, we are constantly changing and evolving. I don't know, is this a concept that people are familiar with? I would love to hear. And then as I was starting to understand more how my ego mind was really trying to keep me safe by trying to understand how, I'm just gonna read the it was really how my ego mind is trying to see patterns in order to keep me safe. And safety for the ego mind is about survival, it's not about being happy. And embracing my ego mind for exactly why it's there, my rational mind, also supports me in when I'm using my ego mind. I'm using the ego mind. As in, there's lots of things where the ego mind is perfect to use. I'm not going to get into some of the examples and some of the tools. But it is really important, though, to realize that we have parts of ourselves that are only care about survival. And most of us, and I would guess every one of us that's here now, are so lucky that our basic survival isn't something we have to worry about. But we're also lucky in the way that we still have those instincts, meaning that if things got bad, we will still have them. Otherwise, we would be like newborns in the desert. So we need these instincts to still be there. Let me know if that makes sense. And remember, your questions are so welcome. And what I'm then trying to, in a long way, to explain is that getting friends with the scary thing of always change, then realizing that I do not need to do anything to change, because change is happening no matter what. And me loving where I am at now supports in the growth of where I'm going. And a lot of the things I'm going to say now is going to be like, for the mind, the rational mind is going to like scream and say, this doesn't make any sense. And that's again when we start to learn to, in some ways I would say, disconnect, in terms of, thank you for that, rational mind, I love you and you have your purpose, and for this particular subject we're going to listen to you, and it's not going to be relevant. Just waiting to see if there's any questions. Is this something that you're familiar with, or is it kind of new for you? And I'm gonna get then to why it was important for me with this kind of getting friends with this part. So I am a very typical Libra. I have kind of always been struggle with this balancing act, and I also have very intense polarities. Like I was so super race, loving math and science and etc. And then also I've always been very into spirituality and drawing and creativity, and in some ways also just want to play, and having that kind of, in a lot of ways I would say, inner battle always around balance. And I feel that very much connected to perfectionist is this idea of always being in equilibrium, always being this kind of well-balanced. Really, that's what we see in the world as this ideal, is to be, what I realize now is about being emotionless. And a life without emotions isn't a life. And so for me, it was a huge aspect of actually, I'm going to use the word, killing the idea of balance. Because what I started to realize is that in order to have change, I needed to be out of balance. Because it's quite rare that a change is coming in all of the parts at the same time. Usually it's something like economy, spirituality, love, our life situations, our friendships, or there's so many aspects, and there's our physical health, there's our mental health, there's our emotional health, there's so many aspects of us, right? And these parts are constantly catching up with each other. And when I then started, that has been a huge part of my self-love, is to not try to put the volume down on any of my aspects, but to let the other aspects catch up. So for instance, I have a lot of inner fire. I have so much fire. And if we're going to speak about astrology, then I have a stellium, as in I have 6 planets in Leo's house, in addition to having Leo Moon and Leo Mars. And I'm not going to make this into astrology. My point is, I have a lot of energy, and I'm a lot of woo, and a lot of laughter, And that's something that I've been trying to turn down. And it keeps at times coming up, oh, Marta, you're too much now. And the thing is that no, I'm not supposed to tone anything down. The one part I am making conscious of, the one part that I did just say in some ways to tone down is the ego voice. But that is something I still honestly believe that it's nice to tone it down. By toning it down, I do not actually then mean to say to turn it off. What I'm saying is that where do you put your attention to where you're listening? So I'm not telling my ego to shut up. I did in the beginning. And no, that just starts an inner war. And self-love is the opposite of inner war. It's allowing all of your parts to be there and love and have fun and have a party. And also, like when you have a party, you're not everyone doing the exactly same thing, right? Someone will prepare the food, someone will bring the drinks. Maybe someone is more loving to tidy up afterwards, and someone loves to do the decorations. And what happens if everyone wants to do the decorations and no one wants to tidy up? So every time I'm saying something that is similar to toning down the ego, what I'm really saying is like, you are the master controller, as in you are everything. You are the ego, you are the soul, you are the body, you are the oversoul, you're spirit, you're everything. And that everything gets to decide where one is putting their attention. And it's really like a beautiful also thing to start to think of is that thinking of all your parts as sitting around a table, and that you wouldn't tell someone to shut up. In some situations we do actually do that, but that's when that thing is out of control. And rarely does it. I know that if someone is telling me to tone it down, I'm not going to tone down unless it's said with love, right? I hope I'm making sense. Funny, I got a little bit actually like conscious around, am I too much now? And that's also part of, again, self-love, is allowing yourself to be a person that feels vulnerable, that has sensations and are wondering what others are thinking. So for me, I replaced balance with harmony. As in, how can I bring harmony as an inner union to all of the parts that I am? And as I journey with that for a while now, I'm mostly at peace with balance. As in now, I will catch myself using that word again. But I'm going to say again, be mindful that that kind of idea of balance can be really, really connected to the idea of perfectionism. And I have written down that that is actually one aspect. One can use the ego mind in a beautiful way as a tool when one is having doubts about oneself. And that is to bring rational questions to that fear. For instance, do other people need to be perfect for you to love them? And is there really one idea of perfect? As in, hopefully you have more people in your life, and I'm guessing they're not going to be exactly the same. And they will, be perfect in their unique mix. And just like I see with others how their strength will naturally also have some other sides to them. It will be the same for me. So this is how we can use the ego mind in a beautiful way, by turning the table. What would I think and feel if the roles were reversed? And also asking questions like, if this person is judging me or not loving me because of this, is this person actually valuable for me to have in my life? And sometimes that answer is going to be no, and sometimes that's going to be really hard, because a huge part of my self-love journey is letting people go. And not because those people are bad or wrong, but because they don't actually align with my life and my values. Or we simply want different things. Imagine all the billion people on the world. Makes sense, right? That we're not supposed to have everyone. And that is kind of starting to have that kind of, that saying of, if you love someone, set them free. Is also realizing that love is not about ownership. But that's a different subject, so we're going to go back to self-love. Does anyone have any questions so far? So, what I've tried to state is that change is happening all the time. Change is not something we need to do anything to have, because it will be. And of course, we're also not supposed to just be mindless and just drifting around. It's really good to have some kind of intention, so that the change is beneficial for us. And that comes down for me to listening deeply within, to listen to our intuition. And the intuition is going to be, eventually, the more you listen to it, the stronger and stronger it gets. And also not listening to it can also make it stronger and stronger, as long as you're honoring your intuition. I shared a story with my Instagram followers about, what was it, like, I think it was 8 months ago. Oh, time's flying, but it's 8 months ago, where I got this nudge of remembering my wallet, and I didn't. This is just a minor example, but it's a very quick example to show. And then when I got to the store, and I was like, oh, okay, I forgot I was actually, in a matter of seconds, going to pure joy for the amazingness of how practical even my intuition is, because it was knowing 3 hours in advance to remind me of the wallet. And I didn't listen. And I celebrated my intuition rather than doing self-mutilation of why didn't I listen. So I was like, wow, I was focusing on the amazingness of my intuition rather than beating myself up for not listening. And that's the way, again, using the ego mind to actually support the intuition. And that is what is now for me a guide. And that is for me now the guide of how to know where to focus, or wanting to expand, is to listen to that kind of pull of energy. I'm gonna do a little bit more, and then I'm gonna look at the questions, so keep bringing them. Because a huge part of self-love journey is also allowing yourself to become your potential. staying small is not self-love. And that is then the interesting balance of loving where you're at, and then also gently listening to that pull, really listening within. And that is found in the heart and in the body, or from pure knowing. It doesn't come from sitting down and thinking about it. So using the mind to think is really amazing to make practical decisions. So this is about, again, about knowing who you ask and who you put as a taskmaster. As in, there's lots of things that the ego is amazing to, and there's lots of things that the ego isn't so good at. And it's going to be the same with the soul. It's going to be the same with all of your different parts that will be experts at its own area, and will be mediocre or really bad at others. And the journey to loving where you're at is exactly that, a journey. So my experience is that there is no magic thing I can tell you now that is going to change that in 1 hour. You're just going to love everything about where you're at now. All I can do is keep sharing how it's changing all the time for me. How I'm deepening every day into self-love. And how much I have hated myself for 38 years before that. A huge part of me has always adored myself too. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't part of me that was strong in believing in myself, of course. But I'm saying a huge part of me has been in extreme internal war. So it's that, as I was talking about yesterday, is about knowing that we tend to exaggerate in the short term, and we tend to think too little about ourselves and where we can come in the long term. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit of some comments now to see how to know when change, healing, growth is overdone and being and loving yourself as is forgotten. Could you rephrase that? How to know when change, healing, growth is overdone. I would love to understand it, so it's great if you can rephrase it. Okay. And then how? Okay, it's jumping when I'm trying to read. That question isn't relevant. This is about self-love. He was saying, my question is peaceful mind, how to get rid from shitty people if they're very close in relation. That's another self-love question. And the answer is tell them no. Okay, and I was jumping. I suppose you will, Paul is saying, I suppose you will address shadow fear of change later. Well, I think I'm sharing about shadow work all the time. If you have a specific question, you're welcome to drop it. And okay, I have how to know when the balance of growth and acceptance of the now is not balanced. The honest answer is that this is a very mind question. This is trying to grasp things and understand things only from the mind. And that is never gonna, as long as one is letting the ego mind be the master, as long as one is letting the rational mind or grasping and trying to understand these things like this, it's not gonna happen. Because the ego minds intention in life isn't survival, but it is very possible, like how it is now for me, is that my ego mind is so eager to be of service for me. So she has gotten to be this amazing shadow hunter and this amazing support for me. So now it's getting to that point where, because I'm not pushing her away, because I don't have the internal war, because I'm allowing her to speak, then it's a different kind of internal communication. The thing is that intuition is never going to make sense for the rational mind, because intuition knows in advance what's going to happen. And that's why we often, when we are in a ego mind focus, which basically all the Western world have, you know, it's this idealization of the rational mind, then we're missing that magical pulse from the intuition. Because I'm going to say again, the intuition is not going to make sense, because it knows the future. And I got another question on Instagram today, so I'm going to share how also sometimes it can feel like our intuition is failing us. And a huge part of that is that in some ways it's really good to apply and use the ego mind to support us when we are struggling with something, in order to actually reverse our thinking. Because what tends to happen is that in our everyday life, we tend to worry so much about the past and the future. The past and the future, the past and the future. You know, that's again trying to have control of life. And the reality is that, you know, life is now. The more we're present and aware of what's going on in our bodies and around us in the now, the more we can then also get the positive change in our life. But if we focus on the past, which is what happened, that is just putting energy on something that we can't change. Because there is never the exact same situation. Never, ever. Every fraction of a second is unique. And the future hasn't happened yet. And the future is totally dependent on how we are handling this moment here and now. But what happens when we get into a lot of emotions and pain and etc. is that then we tend to be extremely present with what is. And then lose track on the bigger picture. For instance, reminding ourselves how we have been in this situation, similar situations before, and it still worked out. And also having that bigger picture spanning out, and then realizing that this can make perfect sense if we're willing to look at the bigger picture. And in order so that is how I'm trying to see how you can use the mind, ego mind, as a tool in order to create self-love. And before getting to using the ego mind, though, I think it's really, really important to honor one's emotions. I think of emotions as a feminine aspect. And by that, I'm not saying the female, I'm saying the feminine aspect. And we all have feminine aspect within, no matter the gender we relate to. And pure emotions and feelings are lasting between 6 seconds and 90 seconds. And to just truly just be in the emotions and actually just in some ways drown ourselves in the emotions in the moment that's there and then is a necessary way in order to get to the lesson of it. But if we straight away are trying to get to the lesson, we are bypassing our emotions, we are bypassing, and we're not going to get the full message. And that is why we keep repeating over and over and over in our lives, because I'm sure there are others like me that keep seeing how we keep reliving the same shit in different wrappings, or even the same shit in some ways over and over. And that is because we have allowed our rational, that is the masculine aspect, to drive over and just kind of trying to get to that positive. Any questions or reflections? Drop them. And I'm going to shift a little bit. And I am also going to round up soon, as I spoke such a long time yesterday. So I'm trying to keep this manageable for people. So I have 2 more things to cover today. And where was it? Yeah. Is ease, slow, and gentle. Allowing ourselves to rest. To realize that really anything we're doing is taking us away from self. So self-love, that's here. In all our bodies, of course. But every time we're doing, we're taking ourselves and our energy away from self. So ease, soft and gentle. And for some, this can maybe be different. I have always been a type of person that has had a lot of energy. So that was my path. For others, maybe they need to get some fire up their ass. Because remember, my message is always going to be about, I can only share what has been for me. And my path is my path. And I want to encourage you to get really, really curious of what's my path. And even more, what's my path today? What's my path right now? And that is a focus of looking within. And that is also part of the funny irony sometimes, because in a lot of ways my message is all about having people to listen within. So I'm trying to have people listen to me to, to say that, listen within. Yeah, so the last I'm gonna cover, with the exception of answering questions, so please drop them, is that when it comes to ease, what I'm saying that is that what is meant for us will come to us. But that isn't saying that life is gonna, we can just sit on our ass and everything is gonna fall in our laps. But for me, the work is staying with the tension of not knowing. The work is feeling the tension of being vulnerable. What if someone is going to reject me? What if no one shows up in the life? So the work that many speak of is that, for me, is self-love, is staying with oneself in everything and anything, staying inside of the body, staying present. Because expansion is always going to be painful. because expansion means going to beyond your comfort zone. So I'm going to say again, the work for me, any kind of work, spiritual work, shadow work, and etc., is really staying with tension. And that is why I focus so much on emotions, because, and all these kind of things that's, is about one's ability to hold one's energy. Emotions is energy. So the more we are capable of holding and staying with our own tension and staying with our emotions, the more we get in our lives. The more aliveness, the more pleasure, the more joy. And that is going to include as well, pain, heartbreak, sadness, anger. It's part of life. And it's hugely important to, in my perspective, to embrace that we hold all emotions, and that, for instance, anger in itself is not negative at all. Because anything and everything we have inside has a gift aspect and has a shadow aspect. So, someone is asking in Tantra, what is self-love? I'm not the right person to ask that question. I'm here to teach what I think, my world flow experience. Okay, this was it for today. Tomorrow I'm gonna cover more questions. And if there is anything that is coming up, please share with me, because you will be the guides to what I'm gonna share about tomorrow. So what do you want? Do you want more practical tools? Do you want more stories? Do you want more what doesn't work? Do you want more what works? And even if you're watching this replay in a few days or even a few months, please send me, because I am always gonna want to do things based on what I'm always gonna want to share with where the energy is taking me. So yeah, I hope this gave some kind of value. And I see some are not able to make it tomorrow. I totally understand. It was on purpose that I had different kind of time zones, and also thinking about tomorrow being New Year's Eve, at least in Norway. For some in Australia it's going to be 1st of January. So it's interesting also with all this international community we have, where someone is actually living in the future and someone in the past. That's a joke. Okay, I'm gonna end now. Lots of love. Keep sending questions and reflections, and yeah.